Writing the measures and data collection section is where your study becomes visible in its final procedural form. By the time you reach this section, you should not be inventing new ideas or redefining core concepts. You should be documenting decisions that have already been made about constructs, variables, operational definitions, and measures. If you find yourself introducing new conceptual language or adjusting definitions while writing this section, that is usually a signal that something upstream needs revision. This section serves two primary purposes. First, it explains exactly how each variable will be measured or examined. Second, it explains how data will be collected in a way that is transparent, replicable, and clearly aligned with your research questions. It is not a literature review. It is not an extended justification of your topic. It is a procedural explanation of what will happen and how those procedures connect back to your conceptual foundation. It is also important to recognize that this section should read differently from earlier chapters. Earlier sections may have been argumentative or explanatory in tone. This section is procedural. The goal is clarity, not persuasion. You are not convincing the reader that your topic matters. You are showing the reader exactly how your study will function. Alignment is the central standard in this section. Alignment means that the construct definition, the variable, the operational definition, the instrument, the scoring or coding process, and the analysis plan all logically connect. A reader should be able to trace a straight line from the construct named in your problem statement all the way to the data that will be analyzed. If any link in that chain feels implied rather than explicitly stated, alignment is weak. There are specific criteria that determine whether alignment is present. The construct must be clearly defined and grounded in the literature. The variable must directly represent a dimension of that construct. The operational definition must specify what counts as evidence of the variable. The instrument must be capable of producing data that match that operational definition. The scoring or coding procedure must yield values that correspond to the variable. The analysis must use those values to address the research question. When those pieces are visibly connected, alignment is achieved. Here is a fully written aligned example. Suppose the construct is independence for learners with autism and dyslexia, defined in the literature as the ability to initiate and complete academic tasks with decreasing reliance on external support. One variable representing this construct is frequency of adult-initiated prompts. In this study, frequency of prompts is operationally defined as the number of verbal or gestural prompts provided by an adult during a 20-minute academic task. This variable will be measured using a structured observation protocol completed by trained observers during task sessions occurring twice per week over a 4-week period. Observers will tally each adult-initiated prompt in real time using a standardized recording sheet. Inter-observer agreement will be calculated on 20% of sessions to support consistency. For each participant, total prompts per session will be averaged across sessions to produce a mean prompt frequency score. Lower scores will indicate higher levels of independence. These scores will be analyzed to examine differences in independence across instructional conditions. In this example, the alignment chain is visible. The construct is defined. The variable represents a dimension of that construct. The operational definition specifies what counts as a prompt. The instrument produces data that match the definition. The scoring procedure yields an interpretable value. The analysis connects back to the research question. Now consider a misapplied version that sounds formal, but is misaligned. Independence will be measured using system-generated analytics from the learning platform. Data collected will include number of logins, time spent in the platform, and number of completed modules. These data will be exported and analyzed to determine differences between groups. This paragraph appears procedural, but the alignment chain breaks in several places. The construct is not defined in this section. The variable representing independence is not identified. There is no operational definition explaining how logins or time represent independence. The instrument has replaced the variable. The scoring has no interpretive meaning tied to the construct. The paragraph describes data collection, but it does not demonstrate conceptual alignment. Here is how that paragraph could be revised to restore alignment. Independence. defined as the ability to initiate and complete academic tasks with decreasing reliance on external support, will be examined through two variables. The first variable, frequency of adult-initiated prompts, will be measured using structured observation as described above. The second variable, autonomous module completion, is operationally defined as completion of assigned modules without instructor-initiated prompts during the task period. System analytics will be used to identify module completion events and cross-referenced with observation records to verify absence of prompts. Completion rates without prompts will be calculated for each participant and compared across instructional conditions. In this revision, the system analytics remain, but they are clearly tied to an operationalized variable that represents the construct. The instrument supports the variable rather than replacing it. Here is a qualitative example demonstrating alignment. Suppose the construct is anxiety during academic tasks, defined in the literature as cognitive, emotional, and physiological responses to perceived academic demands. Anxiety will be examined through semi-structured interviews, focused on participants' experiences during challenging tasks. Interview questions will explore anticipatory worry, emotional responses, and behavioral avoidance. Interviews will be conducted individually, audio recorded, and transcribed verbatim. Data will be coded using a construct-informed coding framework based on the cited definition of anxiety. Codes will reflect cognitive worry statements, emotional descriptors, and avoidance behaviors. Themes will be developed to describe how anxiety manifests during academic tasks. Even without numeric variables, the alignment chain remains visible because the construct definition guides the interview focus, coding structure, and interpretation. Another common mistake in this section is overclaiming. Writing that a measure proves independence or demonstrates anxiety suggests a level of certainty that research design does not support. Measures produce data that represent variables aligned with constructs. Maintaining precise language protects the integrity of your study and prevents inflated claims. It is also important to maintain internal consistency across chapters. The variable names used in the measure section should match exactly the language used in the purpose statement, research questions, and data analysis section. Even small wording shifts can create the impression of misalignment. You should also be aware of tense. In a proposal, this section is typically written in future tense because the study has not yet been conducted. In a completed dissertation, the section is written in past tense because the procedures have already occurred. Maintaining consistent tense contributes to clarity and professionalism. Finally, distinguish clearly between the measures subsection and the data collection procedures subsection. The measures subsection focuses on variables, operational definitions, instruments, scoring, and alignment. The data collection procedures subsection explains sequence and logistics, including when data will be collected, in what order, by whom, and under what conditions. Feasibility and ethics also belong here. You should demonstrate that procedures are realistic within your context and timeline. If instruments require permission or licensing, that should be addressed. If data involves sensitive information, storage and confidentiality procedures should be described. Accessibility considerations should be included when relevant. A final alignment check is to trace the entire chain for each variable and ensure it is visible in writing. This construct is defined as this, based on the literature. This variable represents this dimension. This operational definition specifies what counts as evidence. This instrument produces data that match that definition. This scoring procedure yields interpretable values. This analysis addresses the research question. If any part of that chain is implied rather than written, revision is needed. When the measures and data collection section is written with this level of clarity, reviewers do not have to infer how your study functions. They can see coherence from concept to procedure. Alignment is not something you state abstractly. It becomes visible on the page through precise, consistent, and disciplined writing.